The Audi E-Tron was one of the first pure electric luxury SUVs to go on sale when it arrived in 2018, and it's now been given new tech, more range, new styling and even a new name, the Audi Q8 E-Tron. It's not completely new then, the Q8 E-Tron, it is a heavy facelift of that existing car, but I do think it looks pretty fresh and modern. You can even see that here it's got a new Audi badge, a new 2D Audi badge. I think that actually looks less classy than it did before, but you know, it's all new, and the Q8 moniker clearly makes it clear that this is the top dog in the Audi electric SUV lineup. Now, one of the things that Audi has really worked on is the aerodynamics on this. So it is it's quite different. You can see that it's the new car, and the aerodynamics on this, particularly around the wheels here and on the Sportback that we've got here, which is the swoopiest or slightly sportier model, the drag coefficient is down to 0.24, which is really impressive. The SUV, the slightly more practical one, that's down to about 0.27, and that has contributed to a maximum range now of 373 miles on this Sportback 55 E-Tron that we've got here. The battery's been updated too, so you now get a usable lithium-ion battery capacity of 89 kilowatt-hours in the 50 model, which is good for a range of up to 305 miles, or the 55 that we've got here gets a 106 kilowatt-hour usable battery that manages 362 miles by WLTP standards. Every Q8 E-Tron is four-wheel drive, with the 50 getting 355 brake horsepower, the 55 402 brake horsepower, and there's the range-topping SQ8 with a storming 496 brake horsepower. Prices run from £67,000 for the E-Tron 50 SUV, while the 55 starts at £77,000, and going for the Sportback will add another £2,500 to those costs. Of course, most will go for a mid-spec S-Line for its sportier looks, which adds a further £5,000 to proceedings. In short, the Q8 E-Tron is not cheap. One of the things that the E-Tron has always done really well is interior space. It's always been one of the biggest cars that you can get in this class. And, well, of course that hasn't changed. So even in the Sportback here, which loses a fair amount of depth of its boot, it's still got a 523 litre boot, which is pretty huge. Go for the standard SUV, you get 569 litres. To put it in context, basically in the Sportback you get a really big boot floor, but it is a bit shallow. In the bigger SUV, it's going to be one of the best in the class, and it is a real shame that you can't get a 7-seat version of the Q8 E-Tron, even if you go for the full-size SUV, which obviously you can do with a Tesla Model X. However, you do also get a really decent-sized frunk that you can put your cables in. There's more legroom back here than in most rivals too, but the headroom in the Sportback is a bit restricted. At least it feels classy, but disappointingly, having climate control for the back seats is an optional upgrade. Even so, it really does feel pretty luxurious back there, especially if you go for the optional panoramic glass roof. The same can be said for the space up front in the Q8. It really is a very classy feeling place in terms of the material finish. I really like the sort of slim steering wheel. It's a lot of gloss black, I have to say that, and you do end up with fingerprints all over it, so I don't know if I'm really completely sold on that, but the actual architecture and the general sort of perceived finish and ambience in here is really, really nice. You can go full aristocratic spec with wood trim if you want, although I suspect most people will go for, you know, the S-Line, which you can get your aluminium trim, or even carbon fibre you can step up to. So you can go fully modern or fully National Trust, depending on what you fancy. It's really comfy up here. Visibility to the back in the Sportback is really quite poor. I'm going to talk about the side cameras a bit more when I'm driving, so I'll come back to those in a minute. The screens, naturally, you get your full bevy of twin touchscreens in here as standard. Up here you do all your nav, your media. Of course, you get your Apple CarPlay, your Android Auto, all the features that you expect. You also get this sort of haptic feedback, so when you press a button, the screen feels like it vibrates. I think that's all right, but I just wish the screen responded a bit more, and I find the screen is a bit glossy, so it reflects a bit in the sunshine. Down here you've got all your climate control, that kind of works fine. So I actually would probably prefer just some standard, you know, rotary climate controls, but it does look really smart, and you've got all sorts of menu functions in your climate control. It does the job. I personally prefer actually the single bigger touchscreen in the Tesla and the Ford Mustang Mach-E, or indeed the rotary control that you get in some of the BMWs. I find those a little bit easier to use on the move, but this certainly, it does the job and it looks really smart. Charging has been improved for the Audi Q8 E-Tron too. The 50 gets the same 150 kilowatt maximum charging speed as before, but the 55 model can now charge at up to 170 kilowatts. But their differing battery sizes means that both manage a 20 to 80% rapid charge in around about 30 minutes. Put another way, you'll get 100 miles of range in around 20 minutes in the 50, but potentially in some 15 minutes or less in the 55. Plug into a 7 kilowatt home wall box and you'll have a full battery in between 13 and 16 hours. So Audi has tweaked the standard air suspension on the E-Tron Q8. It's also got a faster steering rack. It's got a new electric rear motor as well. They really have actually done quite a lot to this car to make sure that it stays up to date with all of its rivals, which they need to do because there's a lot of new cars in this class. Things are moving quite quickly in the sort of luxury EV stakes. And the result is, I think it's pretty much what Audi was aiming for. They describe it as being looking for a balance between comfort and sportiness. And I think that's exactly what they've got. But more comfort than sportiness, but even in dynamic, it still feels quite cushy and smooth, and it's just a really nice touring car, this. Really, really quiet, refined, lovely ride. It's got a really lovely loping sort of ride comfort. The steering is, there's not a massive amount of feel to it, even though Audi does says that actually it's improved the feel on the steering for this update, as well as giving it a quicker rack. It still feels like a car that's quite heavy and that just feels absolutely at its best when it's kind of cruising around. Certainly a Jaguar I-Pace or a Ford Mustang Mach-E going to be much more fun. But this is also far more comfortable than something like the Tesla Model Y. So, you know, you win some, you lose some, I suppose. But Audi does tend to go really big on tech, and one of the features that you get on this car are these virtual side mirrors, or, well, they're cameras, aren't they? Let's call it what it is. I really don't like cameras in place of side mirrors. I've said this about every manufacturer's cameras. Honda's are the best because they've got a nice big screen up here, so the screen is kind of where your eye falls through muscle memory. Because this is all what we're used to, isn't it? This is one of the problems, is we're so used to standard mirrors that suddenly, when you're glancing out of the window and there's a camera there with nothing to look at, it's really disconcerting. I drove one of these across Europe for 24 hours solid with the cameras, and I still kept doing it by the end of that. But it's not just about getting used to it. It's not a familiarity issue. It's the fact that these just aren't as good as side mirrors. I know that the contrast at night is better, so you do actually get more detail on this video stream than you will on a standard mirror at night, for sure. And I do understand as well that they have a wider view, and I understand that it improves aerodynamics, so it sounds like a win-win-win, doesn't it? But it's not, because in practice, A, the screen's really tiny and it's quite hard to see. B, you can't adjust what you're looking at by moving your head like you can with a mirror, which is a very natural, obvious thing to do, and particularly when you're parking and manoeuvring, you don't realise you do it as much as you do, and you really miss it when you've got cameras. I've actually heard sort of from various sources in different companies that the camera technology is now becoming so affordable that in the future it may well actually be cheaper to replace a camera like this than it will a conventional mirror. Whether I believe that or not, I don't know, but there's also that aspect, isn't there, that it's more stuff to possibly go wrong when the car gets older. Mind you, I quite like the brake regen, but what's odd about the Audi, so Audi believes that allowing the car to sort of freewheel and coast freely is the more efficient method, because you're travelling further without putting any input in from the electric motors. So you can increase your brake regen here and it gets really heavy, but then as soon as you accelerate again, it defaults to just coasting, and it will only brake automatically if it senses another car or a junction ahead. So it's a bit different to others, and that can take a bit of getting used to because it does feel like the car's changing how it's responding. Talking about brake regen and efficiency, this has been a weak spot for the E-Tron because it's a heavy car, and also this is not a bespoke EV chassis. So this platform that the Q8 E-Tron is based on is an older platform that also has got combustion engine cars on. That plays a part in it in terms of the efficiency. With the aerodynamics, I think have helped because I'm seeing efficiency about 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour, which isn't terrible.
Efficiency has been a real weak point for the E-Tron until now, but it has improved for this update, and we managed 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour on a steady motorway journey in warm temperatures. Good for a real-world range of 286 miles in this big battery 55. Expect that range to creep up in slower driving, while colder temperatures will see it drop to more like 230 miles despite the standard heat pump. It's not the fastest either. At 0 to 62 miles per hour in 5.6 seconds, even for the more powerful 55, it's a way off the Model Y or Jaguar I-Pace, or even the Genesis GV70 that's way cheaper, if not as long range as the Audi. But in a car weighing this much, it still feels more than fast enough.
So there you have it. The Q8 E-Tron is really rather lovely, and of course the range is improved, really comfy, so there's lots to like. But I just have this issue that I don't think it's as fun to drive as plenty of others. Yes, it's comfy and spacious, but when you've got alternatives like the Tesla Model Y, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, BMW iX, and I think the iX has got an even nicer interior than in here, I'm just not sure what the Audi's offering over and above any of those rivals. It's lovely, but it's also not really got a unique selling point. What does it do that something else doesn't do better? And it's not cheap, this car, is it? So ultimately, there's not a lot wrong with it, especially if you avoid the camera mirrors, but there's nothing specifically right about it either.
Don't forget to head to CarGurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars, including loads of electric options as well. Please do subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel, like the video and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our videos.